Hello and a very warm welcome, everybody, to today's choice event, number 85 already, which is called From Cost Center to Climate Lever Unlocking Logistics Potential in Scope 3. My name is Josepha. I'm the Growth Marketing Lead at Climate Choice, and I'm truly delighted to welcome you all to today's session on this Friday afternoon. It's really fantastic to see again this growing community coming together, whether it's your first time here or you're already a regular. And together we've got the chance in this format to dive into one of the most complex and high impact fields of climate action, namely Scope 3 decarbonization. And we are Climate Choice, your climate intelligence platform, enabling procurement and sustainability teams to jointly move beyond manual data collection and supplier outreach, because we want to help you gather high quality primary emission data, easy and at scale, so you can drive measurable Scope 3 impact together with your supply chain partners. And because Scope 3 is not just complex, but deeply cross-functional, we created this webinar series to showcase concrete real-world best practices from those people that are currently reshaping Scope 3 transformation inside their organizations. Now, logistics and transport, we all know about it, and they are actually embedded in every single supply chain. And yet, they are still too often actually treated only as a cost center rather than as a strategic climate lever. And this is exactly what we want to change today, because logistics accounts for up to 50% of Scope 3 emissions in many industries. So turning transport into a driver for decarbonization is actually not only smart, but essential. And that's exactly what today's session is all about, seeing transport not as a problem, but as a solution, a chance to rethink business models, to improve cost efficiency and reduce emissions all at once. And I'm very thrilled to be joined today by someone who's making that shift happen in practice. Our speaker has spent her career at the intersection of logistics, transformation, and sustainability, including in senior leadership roles at the Volvo Group. She now leads a bold new initiative that's turning logistics into a climate solution, a company that exists to make every transport sustainable through smarter, greener, and more collaborative logistics. So please join me all in welcoming the CEO of Logistics, Jessica Öhrblad. Hi, Jessica. So excited to have you today. Hello, hello. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. I'm very happy to be part of the seminar today.
Yeah, so glad to have you. And I'm also so happy that we sorted all the visuals out, you know,
we did right.
The logistics problem, so to say, in our Zoom setup. So happy to have you here now, fully visual. All right, and now before we actually dive into your presentation, I'm also very excited to welcome my dear colleague and the co-founder of Climate Choice, 𝗴𝗲𝗏𝗏, because she will join us later in the session to share a quick outlook on this year's Climate Transformation Summit that is just around the corner. And she will also share why this is actually the go-to event for anybody serious about accelerating Scope 3 decarbonization across industries. So hi, Lara, so great to have you also with us here. How's your day going so far?
Yeah, really good, and super happy to have Jessica here today. So I had the chance to meet her in person, not really a year ago, half a year ago. So it's great to meet at the summit in person, and then also to learn today much more about this overlooked topic of transport, even though we hear most of our customers having big challenges in that area. But then I think it's often an area that is pushed to the future, or up until now. So happy to learn more about how to get started today.
Yeah, correct. And I mean, we will be talking about the challenges, right, Lara, that you just mentioned, but also I'm so glad that Jessica brought so many opportunities with her. So really making this, you know, the story of potentials that we can all leverage. And before we hand over that stage, just a quick reminder to everybody tuning in. This is also your space to engage. So you have this Q&A button and the tool below. So you can drop your questions in any time throughout the session. So let's see how many we can address as we go through the presentation, and then also afterwards. And if not, then we will make sure that we gather them and that we then also ask them to Jessica after the session and send them to you. And with that, Jessica, I mean, before, kicking it off with Logivity, your whole career has been, very much logistics focused, so to say. But then again, also now you're in this like spin-off of the Volvo Group, which is something, I guess, quite special in the field. So how come, what is, what is driving your passion about logistics? Tell us a little bit more about how you got where you are today.
Well, Yusuf, I really come from a background, from a study perspective. I started as a mechanical engineer, and at the time it was actually quite few females studying mechanical engineering. But I'm not sure if I was overly engaged and excited about the hardcore engineering and technical stuff. But I'm also quite stubborn, so I kind of fulfilled the education in itself. But then I quite quickly got into logistics, supply chain, transportation. And I remember one of my first kind of job interviews, I was applying for a logistic development role at the time. I got the question, so why do you really apply for, what is driving your logistics? And coming from an engineering background, I was like, well, I think it's quite simple. And, and this manager just looked at me, and little did I know, because I think that taking it from the very theoretical stuff, it felt very non-complex in its sense, but I've learned a lot since then. Obviously, logistics and transportation is everything but simple. It's very much kind of a balance between theory and the practicalities. There's a lot of things happening in the practice, right? And I think that is really what is triggering me. How can we find solutions for all of that, pushing the whole industry ahead? Then I had the benefit to work in many different roles and also in many different part of the industry, seeing it from different angles. And obviously, I think that bringing the sustainability aspect into it is also very much my private passion. I love the nature. I love being out both kind of on sea and on mountains. And that is really something that I feel very strongly for preserving for kind of us and our future generations. As such, it sounds very high-flying, but it's truly kind of what I feel. So I feel that with Logivity, I got the perfect opportunity to really have my dream job, combining those three different aspects in itself, right?
Wow, what a chance, right? But then also, I mean, so cool for them to have you there at this like very particular intersection. So, I mean, you come in with the study background, with all the knowledge, and then there's still the passion and the experience you accumulated over the time. And I'm truly, like looking forward, because when we had then also the first talk, I have to be honest that I didn't hear about Logivity before, but now, I'm following you on LinkedIn, of course. I had a look at your webpage, etc. And it's very one of the companies where I'm thinking, you really, think through how you also get into this very change-resistant environment of transportation to make it look cool what you're doing. So really turning logistics into something where nice, I also want to work there maybe in the future. So
great, Jessica. You're more than welcome.
No, but really cool. So, I mean, let's talk about, what else you're doing at Logivity, like cookbooks and such, but let's not confuse the audience with that right now. And let's hop into your presentation, do we?
Super. Then I will just manage the technicalities with sharing the presentation here, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Looks like it works.
All fine? It's just a little, yeah. Perfect. Great. So my thinking for today is that I've really divided kind of the sections into three different areas. I will start to talk a little bit about kind of transportation and the transportation industry as such, and the challenges, as well as you very much highlighted in the introduction here as well, the opportunities that we see. I will spend one section on how we within Logivity see that we can contribute to accelerate the change that we see that it's so much needed in this industry. And then I will kind of round off with a little bit of thinkings ahead in terms of transport trends, but also trends in general on the market that we see ahead. Continuing to frame the transportation just for a couple of sentences. Obviously, transportation is really the lifeblood of our modern world, and it's really connecting people, goods, ideas, opportunities across vast distances, right? And it's really the essential infrastructure to enable our modern world to function. And it's powering economies, it's creating opportunity for cultural exchange as well as human development. However, transportation also brings challenges. And did you know that about 25% of the global greenhouse emissions really come from transportation? And a great part of that is goods transportation. What we also see is that these numbers, or the numbers of transported goods for the coming 25 years, is foreseen to double. And taking those two numbers together, obviously, what we see then, if we don't do anything, we will have a huge amount of emissions coming from emissions in 25 years as well. And that is in absolute numbers. In relative numbers, it is even more, because exactly as you pointed out, Lara, other industry has much more aggressive roadmaps on how to really decarbonize than the transportation in itself. The third challenge that I want to mention is that we have an utilization of the industry, which is about half. So basically, of all the transport capacity that is moving around, it is pretty much 50% filled in different senses. Some is more, some is less, and it's a lot of empty mileage moving around, right? And here we can see that that has, of course, a big impact on many companies' scope 3, because it's few companies that doesn't transport anything. The relation on how much of the scope 3 transportation really is depends on what kind of business you are in. But typically we have seen cases that spans between 10% and it's up to 50%. And the challenge is obviously shared between very many companies and stakeholders. However, within Logivity, we also see those 50% as a great opportunity, because with every percentage we can increase that obviously impacts both the financial situation as well as the environmental situation for the transportation in itself.
Now, Jessica, just to get into this for a second, because I think these numbers really, they speak for themselves, right? So if transport already today accounts for a quarter of global emissions, and demand, it's expected to double by 2050, then we're really looking at a massive acceleration of climate impact of transportation in the end, right? And so at the same time, you also point out that capacity utilization remains below 50%. So for me on the surface, if I just see this number, that seems like such a low-hanging fruit for emission reduction, actually. And you're also saying that at Logivity, you're looking at, taking this as a lever. But why do you think up until now, logistics is still such a, let's call it maybe underused lever in decarbonization? What's holding companies back today from, tapping into this potential? What do you see? What are the challenges?
I certainly agree that is the case. And I think that sometimes we claim that, transportation is part of the scope 3, but in many cases it's almost part of the scope out, right? For many companies. And I think it is because it is quite complex. And I will mention some of the areas. I think that, again, there are many factors impacting this, but I will mention some of them, which I think is quite important to keep with you in this context. The first one is what I call the transportation in the boardroom. I think that transportation and logistics has for many years, or basically for the complete history, been seen as successful as long as it's not noticed. And as long as it's just functioning and you don't bother kind of the real business, then it's good. I think we all got painfully kind of aware about that during the COVID situation in a different sense, and that is also where kind of that function started to become a little bit more critical within many companies and got a little bit more attention from itself. Secondly, as well, I think transportation within many companies is outsourced, meaning that also within the operational process, it's easier to focus on the production or on the warehousing, things that you completely control yourself. And then the transportation becomes a consequence of that, because you're living kind of in a shared system there together with other goods movers, let's put it like that, in terms of other transport buyers, and then in that sense, right? And then I think also when we talk about scope 3 and talking about the emissions, I think it's also, again, back to that it's a little bit more tangible to talk about the bought material and your material suppliers, rather than stepping into the transport, because of all that complexity and because of that is not really monitored or measured from the beginning to the same extent as other supplier relations are. So I think that those are some aspects into that. I believe that we need to move kind of transportation from being quite an operational capability within many companies to eat itself a little bit upwards on the strategic agenda, so to say, right? Secondly, we see that also within the transport industry as such, it's a lot of different actors collaborating. And for every transport, there are, of course, you know, when you take a transport from A to Z, you have the A to B, B to C, C to D, etc. And that can be quite many legs on the horizontal level, but also on the vertical level, you have many layers of sub-suppliers. So basically the loads are sold between a lot of different actors. And those actors are quite different. It's all between kind of the mom and pop businesses up until the global enterprises. And from that perspective, it's quite difficult to harmonize the business and get the transparency into really how am I as a transport buyer impacting the total utilization in itself, and what can I change in my behavior to really kind of get that perspective. Having that transparency and moving into the next area that I see is that it is also when it comes to the transport digitalization. I think also here, I think that we're lacking kind of common standards when it comes to transportation, which prevents kind of the daily collaboration to become very efficient. It's of course steered by different P&Ls between different companies, but still to truly kind of get away from the sub-optimization in different contexts, that is a challenge in itself. And that is also varying between different regions, different transport modes, and you name it. Also, if I would look at the transportation industry or the logistics compared to other industries, I dare to say that I think that transportation is a little bit behind when it comes to digitalization and the different actors there, which also then again, with this kind of maturity scatteredness, brings a challenge into that area. That in itself prevents transparency, not only kind of about utilization or where my goods are basically, but also when it comes to different CSR requirements and how you're buying the transport, is that is really kind of fulfilled in the transport in itself once that is actually executed, right? And lastly, possibly I'm provoking a bit here, but what I see is basically that the pricing of the transport is possibly a little bit too low, and is it too cheap to care? I think that transportation in itself is not really carrying the indirect cost that it's really kind of causing to society, which also brings that when we look at the transportation cost in the operational value chain, it's much lower than if we look at the emissions on the operational value chain. And that also brings that, you know, that the transportation in itself, again, coming back to the boardroom analogy, needs to kind of take its place to truly kind of grow in that relation. So what does that really mean? And my question is really, do we have the right incentives to care from different companies' perspective? So we've also listened to quite some voices, obviously, between both customers and partners in the industry. And just to give some real life examples of what kind of transport buyers especially are saying in this area. I would say that the problem is that we are spending too much time to calculate and not enough time to decarbonize. And I think this is very much what happens in many places. There is quite a heavy regulation being set in place in terms of being able to kind of report around emissions, possibly even too heavy in many cases, but to really take action, that is kind of the efficiency is, we need to make the reporting efficient to be able to really kind of more use the numbers and take the right actions. I think that is very much searched for. We need reliable data and advanced analytics to understand how efficiency can support decarbonization. Again, getting kind of the complete data, understanding the transportation setup and the transportation almost engineering, right? And how different behaviors are supporting the efficiency. Again, it supports the decarbonization, but also the cost of the transportation in itself. Increasing transport utilization is vital. How can we collaborate with other stakeholders to improve? And this can, of course, be done in different contexts. I think we see more and more transport buyers or shippers that are collaborating really to make the transformation in terms of understanding how do they have kind of complementing freights, for example, to be able to implement more energy efficient fuel or implement electric vehicles or different types of. So I think that from a strategic and a structural perspective, there are a lot of things happening. I think that also to come to a little bit more the daily collaboration, it requires digital tools in a different sense. And then lastly, I love this statement, so I needed to bring that on. And that is one of our customers that says that my dream is that we can start to make decisions based on CO2 together with cost and lead time. So it's really integrated into the business and not kind of handled on the side to really kind of make the changes and the transformation stick over time. And doesn't only become a kind of an environmental sustainability activity in itself, so to say, right?
Jessica, you said I find very interesting also about these comments. If you look at them, I mean, they all go into the same direction, yet, you know, there's also like contradicting statements, right? So we focus too much on numbers and don't take the time for decarbonization action. But then again, we don't have enough number in order to, you know, like have the sufficient transparency, so to say, to really find out where's the biggest bang for the buck. So, I mean, it's such an antagonistic, you know, intersection. And I feel that also at Climate Choice, this is what we see with like so many clients. And I'm super happy, you know, later on when we open up the Q&A together with Lara, that she can also talk about it. But this like fine line, you know, of what kind of, you know, transparency do we need to really move actions into where it makes most sense without getting trapped into this perfect data paradox. So very, very interesting.
And especially not wait for the perfect data paradox, right? Because I think that is a little bit also where we see that we need to start and act where we have the possibility now.
Yeah, correct. And I mean, from all of these challenges, right, that are also so like widespread, basically, so ranging from infrastructure gaps to low digitization to an industry, I mean, that tends to resist rapid change. Yet in the middle of all of that, yeah, Volvo Group decided to take this like really, I find, bold step and spin off Logivity with, I love that mission to make every transport more sustainable. So I'm really wondering, you know, besides all of these challenges that we just saw, where or are the opportunities that you spotted and that then also, I guess, drove the decision to found Logivity?
Yeah, and I think that's where we see that one of the key enablers, again, coming back then, is truly kind of creating trusted and collaborative data that different stakeholders are trusting each other to share, to truly kind of understand what does it mean and how can we collaborate and which trade-off does that give. We see that is really one of the keys to really elevate logistics from being this back office function to really kind of having the strategic driver towards decarbonization. And I will come back a little bit later to what we see Logivity connected to that. starting off with kind of a little bit around our history and where we are coming from. As you were into here, Josefa, I think we are founded by the Volvo Group. We are born from an innovation idea within the Volvo Group, and but now we are kind of an independent, we are an independent company which is owned by the Volvo Group. And really where we come from is, of course, the ambition from Volvo to have 100% safe, 100% fossil-free, and 100% more productive products. That has been, and that is fostered through years and years within Volvo. So I think that is really kind of our foundation in itself, and which is still part of the Logivity genes from that perspective as well. Also, there is an ambition to grow the service business, and that is a priority for the Volvo Group. So obviously, I think that those two perspectives were very much kind of coming together when also launching Logivity, together with the third one, which is very much the sustainable transport system agenda, which of course goes for supporting our customers to create sustainable transportation systems, but it also goes for our own operations within the Volvo Group, because we are a large transport buyer ourselves, right? And that is something that we are very proud of and keep very highly, because it's a great opportunity for us to innovate, to learn, but we also want to walk the talk when it comes to creating sustainable transport systems. And from that perspective, we have for many years developed digital capabilities to keep an efficient way of both purchasing and operating transport. We have, for example, a small haulier company, which we're using as an innovation arena, both to try out our products and see how do they work in real life, but also see, okay, but how do we actually operate a transportation system and what is needed in terms of digital capabilities connected to that. And lastly, I think that also that has been very helpful now when introducing the new electrical trucks into our transport system, because that has helped us to understand how do we operate and what kind of business models are needed to be able to help the Volvo's customers in that sense. So we have a big fleet of electric trucks for the Volvo Group running on the roads. Having that said, back to Logivity. So basically, Logivity is a company where we want to provide digital services towards transport buyers, primarily to really foster both optimization as well as collaboration around transportation in itself. It's born and it's driven continuously in terms of the services based on real life challenges that our customers are having. And we are very, very important for us is that we continuously bring all the aspects into our services in terms of both emissions as well as cost and service level. So we truly get this integrated perspective. And we believe that we, together with the industry, should simply do it better together. It cannot be hard. We need to make it simple, but we also need to bake it together. And especially important, we need to do it right. So that is in general about Logivity. What we are kind of basing our methodology on is coming back to the measurability, as we talked about well, just a couple of slides ago here as well, Josefa. And we see that measurement is still a very important foundation for understanding what baseline that is. While we have had the currency of kind of the monetary currency for many years, I think that we still need to mature the emission currency to both understand how do we measure it, how do we get it granular enough, but also what does it mean, right? To be able to take the right prioritization decisions and make the right calls in that sense, again, together with other perspectives. There is a difference between kind of stakeholders that we met 2 years ago until where we are now when we're meeting transport buyers. I think 2 years ago, when we talked about kind of measuring emissions for transport, a lot of kind of our customers at the time said that, yeah, but we ask the carriers on a yearly basis, we get a lump sum, we do like this, and then we send it to the yearly report, right? But now I think that it's more and more that truly want to have this transactional, they want to have it granular enough, they want to be able to engage their organization and really kind of integrate it so you can work with it, right? And again, it can add value in your operational processes in itself. Optimization has been kind of the bread and butter in the transport industry for, of course, it's kind of driven by the cost perspective is into it. So that is still remaining. What is changed, I see, is that once you add on the emission perspectives into it, you can also see that, obviously, again, coming back to this cost relation, that the emissions is heavier on the transportation than the cost is. You also get another leverage, and you can come to a little bit different results on how do you really kind of put your best optimization to safeguard both the kind of the cost investment as well as minimizing the emissions in itself, and to make the right trade-offs, basically. And then we have the transformation part, and here is everything from kind of investing in new fuels, you have new energy sources, you have new engines, and you have also new business models on the market. Here we see that, I mean, obviously it's important with the measurability and the data to be able to, again, secure to take the right call-offs where you need to make investments, that you invest in the right place to get the best bang for the buck, basically, right? But also it makes the optimization piece even more interesting, because then you get even higher leverage also on that part, right? And always when we build our services, we have this holistic approach. So we integrate cost, service level, and emissions, again, to make a transformation that sticks.
Mm. And Jessica, I mean, I can imagine that this is, of course, what you have as the data infrastructure behind and all the systems are quite complex. Yet there was one question from Eric in the chat on the piece of the measurement. And he was asking how exactly you're acquiring then also primary data from the different carriers in the system to achieve a emissions report that is closest to reality. Can you maybe give an example for it in order to answer that question?
So basically, I think that this is a question which is relating back to strive as high as you can, but don't wait for perfection. I think that our service is spanning from what we're always striving for is to get the highest granularity of data highest granularity of the measurement as the data is providing, basically, right? So I think that for some of our services and for some of our customers, we are truly kind of measuring the consumption of the fuel via telematics, for example. We are having a very strong integration when it comes to the filling degrees, securing what kind of fuel it is and so on. But I think it's quite few customers for us yet that has all of their transports in that segment. So in those cases, we do have a fallback plan, and also having a transparency towards the customers on where is the level of quality of the data from that perspective, also enabling them to understand how can they improve in those measurements, right?
Thank you.
Great. So what we're doing at Logivity, basically, Logivity Connect is the heart of our system. It's truly about the digital communication and transparency between the different stakeholders, where we are connecting them different kind of stakeholders. It can be transport buyers, it's different kind of carriers, but it's also different other logistic actors in itself. And on that, we are building different value-adding services, which is basically a suite of services which the customers are using depending on which need and which kind of phase they are in, basically, right? And if I should mention some of them and how kind of the methodology goes through that, we do have the load board, which is a transport auction site. And the transport auction is not only based on the cost, it's also including the emissions, but also the service level, in terms of that we create a collaboration arena between the carriers as well as the transport buyers to secure that they can utilize the capacity in the best sense in terms of the service level. And often that is kind of signaled in the cost and the emissions, right? To secure that is not off track, and we by that is increasing kind of the empty mileage or the unfilled rates or whatever it can be. Another one I can mention is the visibility, and obviously that is a connection to the telematics of the trucks, which then gives you kind of the geographical follow of your goods. But even more important, it's also then again coming into the visibility of the emissions in itself to truly secure that the primary data is conveyed in that sense. And just to give you a little bit of insights in some selected customer cases. I have a cursor here over my... So basically, first one was a customer of ours that wanted to secure that they could start a sustainability journey. This is an industrial customer. They have about 10 plants. And there was a pressure to introduce sustainability, both from kind of the customer's perspective, but there was also growing interest from the organization and the people working within this organization, especially in the Northern Europe, I would say. However, they were also under cost pressure, so they couldn't see that they could make huge investments in that area in itself. So we had a discussion, where do they really start? And basically what they did, because they, at the time, they were quite non-digitalized, so they started by digitalizing their transport, understanding what kind of shipment patterns they had, but also understanding of what does those transport trigger in terms of emissions on a daily basis or even on a transactional basis, right? And that gave really kind of that organization the possibility to set the right incentives on the organization, to set the right measurement, and also to visualize that. And by that, they had also the possibility then to turn that into what I now call the emission hunting perspectives into that, because they can engage all the different business processes into it, right? Secondly, we had a case which was around optimization. And this was a customer that wanted to better utilize the market capacity of transport. So they turned some of the transport into more of a spot buy function, automated spot buy function into that, where they both kind of saved efficiency in terms of kind of that they needed to have less man hours spent into it. But they also, not only did they lower the emissions on it, but they also made quite big savings from the transport. Even if the market rates were increasing, they found that that is a better way to really kind of understand how can they utilize the capacity that is close by on the market at the time where we are right now. And the last one is also around a company which is in the construction industry, and they're kind of providing construction material. They had a frustration. They got quite a lot of questions from all around in terms of kind of how do they were supposed to provide a lot of market data when it comes to emissions from both the product, but also including the transportation done. And it was kind of multidimensional. So it was not always the same question. It was from a customer here or from a region there or from a business unit there or whatever it could be, right? And I felt that I spent quite a lot of time for that. Again, more reporting than value adding from that perspective. So basically, what I wanted when they came to us was really kind of an easy access to their emission data, which was trustworthy and that they can kind of rely on both in terms of reporting, but even more important also in decision making as such. So that was really where we supported them to make efficiencies internally, but then also an arena for collaboration together with their customer in that sense.
And And now, I mean, when we look at it, right, so achieving transparent collaboration, what we always also want to do is to, you know, have shared data. So basically transparency for better decision making. This is also one of the missions that we are driving at Climate Choice. And we pre-discussed, you know, that we could also jump into this use case number 3 a little bit more, because I would actually really love to see how this looks like in practice. So what kind of, you know, capabilities do you give your clients at hand in order to, yeah, not only have transparent collaboration, but I think then also, you know, the efficiency gains out of it. So if we could, you know, maybe just quickly move through it, that would, I guess, be very interesting for everybody here on the call.
Let's do that. And I feel like a TV chef now because I just prepared that, right?
Yeah, we pre-discussed it because yeah, I'm very looking forward to it.
Good. No, but you're right, Josefa. I think that I mentioned most of what is on this slide, and I think that it's many of our customers, including this one, is really struggling. How do we make it both kind of sustainable, efficient in terms of environment, but we cannot afford to kind of make massive investments for that sake? And how do we also provide an alternative for smart and sustainable transport choices? So basically what this customer made and what we did together was that we secured that we had a very standardized emission reporting, so it was accessible from many different dimensions, and you always had the right kind of base for the emissions depending on where the questions were coming from. And already then they had a lot of kind of internal efficiencies, but also as a quality perspectives into how did they report emissions in different contexts, right? Secondly, what they also wanted to do, they wanted to position themselves a little bit ahead of market when it comes to being a sustainable brand. So they wanted, when they got kind of the RFQs from their customers, they wanted to be able to kind of reply back in terms of 2 different options. This is kind of what you're asking for, but we could also kind of do it differently. So here we have supported them with, they're using kind of our product to simulate different options on the transportation, given that you power the transportation with different biofuels, you can go for electrical choices, and you can basically kind of set that up according to that customer relation that this construction company was having done. And then lastly, which I actually think is the most interesting and important, is the collaborative planning, because what happened then was basically that they also are utilizing Logivity as a foundation to have a dialogue together with the customer around collaborative planning, because in that industry, it's quite often, you know, quite short lead times for the transport, quite low planning horizons, but by being able to show the consequences, and this became, again, both on a cost and a financial perspective, they could agree upon areas where they can actually impact the service level, have less frequency, it was in this case, for the benefit of the transportation in itself. And since they could withdraw the frequency, that did quite big savings. And by that, they also reinvested part of that saving into sustainable choices for the transportation that they made. So also there, so basically the outcome of that was that they had the emission data at their fingertips. They enabled them to make the fact-based decision-making. And also they had the foundation and took a collaborative planning approach together with the customer, which gave a sustainability efficiency of 35% on that specific customer case that I had is exactly there. By, again, both optimizing, but also reinvesting.
Cool. Thank you so much. And then, I mean, yeah, looking at the time, maybe we can just take, you know, a couple of minutes on the piece of the trends. And, you know, I mean, also as we pre-discussed, there's so many to talk about. And of course, you know, nobody has the answer of what will really materialize in the future. But maybe you can spotlight just what makes you most looking forward to. So what is, you know, like one key change where you're saying, oh my goodness, if I could, you know, like put my bets on it, then this would be it.
And I think you're right, because I think that as I said before the meeting here as well, I don't at all claim to be an expert on the trend radar. I think that there are many people claiming that maybe. I'm not the one of those, but I think that everyone is as right. I think that we're very much in a perfect storm right now, which we need to a little bit find out where we are going. And that goes everything from geopolitical factors, environmental factors, as well as kind of the legal and the compliance factors in itself, right? But what is clear is that it is a lot of this is also impacting the transportation in itself, of course, right? So I am quite convinced that regardless, the transport industry must continue to strive to become resilient, because there will be bumps along the road. We will never go to having completely localized supply chain, even if I see it more and more that we at least regionalize them, right? And also the trends are pointing in that direction. Efficiency, it's such an obvious gain, right? So I think that is also something that will continue to evolve, also given that we have new technologies in place that can support that in a different sense that we had before, and the true transformation in itself. And again, if I should just come back on your question there, Josefa, if I would pick one, it's really securing that we are kind of getting that complete picture, understanding how do we get this, I call it sticky transformation, because I think that is the only way that will last. Once we get kind of the financial as well as the environmental perspective into the same kind of decisions and taking those direction and making those bets, regardless if it's long term or short term, I think that is what is needed to truly make that transformation.
Yeah, I mean, we're trying to, work on the same piece there. So hopefully we will move into that direction. And then, I mean, there's so much more, that we could actually talk about with you. I mean, we could spend hours here, but I'm also actually very happy that you will be joining our Climate Transformation Summit that is happening on the 4th and the 5th of June, right? Where everybody who is there will have the chance to talk more about not only your career, but then also Logivity and how you are really trying to take all of these opportunities that are on the street, basically, and make them work for people. Yeah, thank you so much for this presentation. And I would actually very much like to quickly hand it over to Lara and to guide us a little bit through the Climate Transformation Summit, because as I was saying, you will be there. So let's get some last people on board to join us in Berlin in 2 weeks' time. And with that, Lara, up to you.
Yeah, first of all, thanks, Jessica, for sharing all the insights about transportation. Yeah, as said in the beginning, right, when you look into supply chain, and what we always say, like Scope 3 emissions, to make it very specific about climate action in the supply chain. I think necessarily there's a big focus on Scope 3.1, so buying products and services, but then we have so much coming up upstream and downstream in the supply chain, and a lot of it is tied to transport and logistics, but then also to topics like downstream partnerships or recycling, end of life of product, and so on. And naturally, what we find is that decision makers in that field are often maybe, let's say, very challenged or even overwhelmed by really making strategic decision about how to decarbonize the supply chain, because it all starts from where do I actually stand today? So finding data about transparency in your supply chain. But then really, I loved the slide that you had, Jessica, with the circle coming from measurement to optimization to transformation. And what we heard a lot in the market is that in the last years, because of the big changes in sustainability reporting, there was a lot of focus on measurement, which is good to start with the first step, right? And to have transparency on where do we actually stand and what are our hotspots and so on. But that there's often not enough time to really look into how do I use the data to take smart decisions, or how do I optimize, what can I change already maybe directly within my company or with my direct suppliers, but then also really going to transformation. So that's where really the exciting part is. And I think, again, what Jessica also shared, right, what we are all intrinsically passionate about is to really have an impact in the end. And that sometimes requires changing the product, sometimes it changes a process, and maybe even a whole business model, where maybe Logivity is even an example in itself in it, right? To go into like rather service-oriented business models as well, having a lot of knowledge from the automotive industry. And yeah, that's how the summit actually now already 5 years ago came into practice, because we saw, okay, everyone working in sustainability procurement, or now the new roles in sustainability procurement, everyone is facing the same challenges. And we have one thing that helps us all in this challenge. We have the same often supply chains even. So everything is interconnected. There are not so many carriers, or there are not so many producers often of a product and so on, or material. So we can even collaborate to have a bigger leverage. And yeah, that's what we bring at the summit together, to really focus on best practices, on learnings, also sharing challenges, but everyone knows them. So we really want to focus on how can we ideally on the next day really make a difference. And this year, it's the first time that it's going to happen in Berlin for 2 days, also in person, bringing together 100 selected sustainability and procurement leaders together. So you actually apply, so to say, over the website. So just that we make sure we have the people really working on the topic there. And having said that, we have, as Jessica mentioned, the last 15 tickets actually. And to give you a small overview, who is there. So Jessica is one of the pictures here. We have about 20 to 30 speakers right now, but then also a lot of people journeying from really across industries, because that's also one of the focus areas of the summit, to really break down the silos and also share from other industries what you could learn, or also leverage the effects of working together. So very excited to really have people from automotive to fast-moving consumer goods to pharmacy, food area, and so on. So it's going to be very exciting. And why we call it, or why we specifically do it in person, is really because we want to focus on the interactive part. So we have the first day mainly being for inspiration, for having deep dive workshops, and also like case studies. And then the second day is very much on roundtables, personal meeting on high level, networking, and very much peer-to-peer learning. So we definitely also want to break up this situation that I find myself often in conferences, that the speakers are there and then the audience is on the other side of the room, but really mix everyone up and make us being part of the same team as we are. So yeah, with that, having said, 4th and 5th June, very happy to be there, and also to have the honor to speak with Jessica then in the panel.
Thank you, Lara, for this very nice invitation to everybody here on the call, again, to join the Climate Transformation Summit. I'm very much looking forward to it. And as we have some more time than also now, I would actually like to, voice some questions that we got from the audience. Also, because there was one question that I would actually like to ask to the two of you, because Jessica, you mentioned on one of your slides that transport doesn't sit in the boardroom yet, which I actually find quite a nice, graphic that builds up in front of my head. And yes, I guess this is what we see with, a lot of Scope 3 levers too. So besides transportation. So Jessica and Lara, to the two of you, what would need to happen to change that? And maybe Jessica, let's start with you for the particular piece for transportation.
Yeah, from my side, I think that, honestly, COVID was bad from a lot of different perspectives, but when it comes to understanding the importance of the supply chain, I think it gave a little bit of a push or a support to those functions to truly kind of understand what value does those functions have for the company. And I think what is very important in this area is that the supply chain, including logistics and transportation, is often the ones holding a lot of data, right? Understanding the complete operational processes, being able to measure and visualize, because I think that is what is in many cases has been lacking. And if you don't see it and at the same time you cannot measure it, then it becomes very intangible. So that, together with setting the strategic direction in terms of that we truly want to transform this part of our business, I think that those ones are key.
I would take the chance and add on that. Yeah, you can't manage what you can't measure. I think that's one big one of it. So thanks for bringing that up again as well, Jessica. But I think what we also see in especially this year, right? And I'm not actually sure it's probably across all regions. So you could also say how your experience is, Jessica. But you mentioned COVID, right, being like one of the big changers. And right now, I think everyone is also a little bit hesitant, like how the market is developing and which crisis is coming up again. So what we see is really also to share the return of investment and like really the business case behind it. And I just found myself this morning in a conversation with a company that's supporting the trading of renewable energy. And they basically say they never start from the renewable energy part. They always start about like, it's biggest business opportunity in energy right now, right? They are the biggest margins, you have the lowest cost, you have the most need also for trading as they are in that area. So to really show nowadays, a lot of solutions are leading by being also the smartest business choice. And I think that's what you also shared, Jessica, right? It's like when you're not thinking about capacity, about resilience, about really using capabilities in the supply chain and within transport, you're really losing a big opportunity and leaving money on the street is what we say, at least in Germany. So I feel that's really the exciting part about it. And what brings it nowadays in the boardroom is really, okay, customer needs it, reporting needs it, but then also it's really the future-proof area to go into and maybe find new opportunities how to develop.
Yeah, thank you. And then also, I mean, if it now, becomes a boardroom topic, it also stays actually to be one of the topics or one of, the key levers in every Scope 3 category, basically. I mean, Jessica, you've been saying it 1, 2, obviously, but then Lara, you pointed out again that for Scope 3, it's also super relevant. So how do you see companies now across industries also starting to embed logistics, decarbonization into their broader Scope 3 strategies, and what should they prioritize first? Maybe Lara, also from your experience from Climate Choice, working together with a lot of companies where we always look into, okay, so what are potential next steps to take based on where we identify the biggest levers for decarbonization? What kind of role does logistics play there from your experience?
As you addressed me, I would go quickly, but then hand it over to Jessica as she's the expert in the field. I think what is really exciting to see is that in most sustainability roadmaps, transport is logically in there. So everyone thinks about it. Maybe you don't necessarily first prioritize it because it's often first about the products and services you are buying. But then what we see is often also that especially companies that maybe haven't yet the biggest market power, so to say, don't or do not have the leverage to directly change how the materials they are buying are produced, but they can definitely decide on the transport and logistics. So it's often one area where they see it's maybe not the biggest portion of their emissions, but it's one of the areas that can have the biggest impact because they have a direct buying decision. And that's also, I think, what is changing so much this whole industry, because more and more customers are asking for it, and they definitely want to make smart climate choices in there. Jessica.
And I think it's a little bit different in different industries as well, and the different customer groups, because it's very much starts for the customer demand, right? And even on the B2C kind of business, we see that there are certain customer groups that are more aware and put a higher interest into that area. And some of those companies are very interested to both make it, or both kind of have a reliability, now and come back to the measurement again, but also make a difference for real, because I think that the complete kind of greenwashing is a little bit washed out, if we can put it like that, right? So I think that they truly kind of want to understand and secure and be able to brand themselves as kind of sustainable aware, and transportation is one part of it. Then I'm back to what you said before as well, Laura. I think that definitely it needs to have kind of a financial stability in that sense, or a positive business case, and that is what I kind of brand as the sticky transformation, because that is really kind of where you both kind of raise the interest, you get the energy, you get eventually whatever funding is needed, but also that you get that push from the company to move ahead in that. And that has to do with, you cannot do everything at once, but taking the right steps in the right order, because in some areas here, we're waiting for maturity in terms of certain regional areas or technology, or there can be other factors, right? So it's definitely an abatement curve in taking the right decisions in the right order to move ahead.
Yeah, thank you. And taking the right decisions in the right order, I think this is now our decision to come to an end, at least for this webinar. And hopefully the subsequent one will be for everybody to join us at the Climate Transformation Summit. I'm super inspired really by the session of today. Thank you so much for your lively contribution, Jessica. Thank you also, Laura, for jumping in again and highlighting the key agenda, and then also for the CTS. And with that, I can't believe that we will see each other in person in 2 weeks' time. And I feel like we already met Jessica because we had so many nice conversations already online. So thanks again for joining us. Thanks also to Caroline, who we don't see right now, but who is working together with Jessica. And because we had a very beautiful preparation for the webinar too. Hi there. And with that, I wish everybody else a beautiful Friday afternoon, and talk to you again soon. Bye.
See you soon.
Bye.
Thanks a lot. Have a nice weekend ahead later. Bye-bye.